Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Creative Belief. This podcast is a curated collection of conversations with creatives who believe that creativity can change the world. My name is Alex. I get to be one of the co-hosts of the show, and I'm here with my buddy and my business partner, Josh. Josh, how's it going today?
Hey man, it's going pretty good. Excited for today's guest. It's always good to have another Josh on the podcast, and I just don't think you can have enough. So
we were talking about that. We were talking about that before we hit record, and I said I've already got enough Joshes in my life in the one. And so I am, though, excited about today's guest. He is an incredibly talented individual. We've got Josh Gaal on the show with us. Josh is an agency producer at Young Laramore, an independent creative agency that helps brands take a stand, based here in Indianapolis. Josh, welcome to the show, man.
Hey, thank you guys so much. I'm excited to be here. It's gonna be a fun one, especially with the two Joshes. Got a lot to work through here.
Yeah, there is a lot to work through. That is a great way to say that.
Yeah, let's make the editing as hard as possible for Alex.
Yeah, you guys do transcripts, right? It's just going to come up as like Josh and Josh and Josh and Josh.
Josh and Josh. It's going to be really confusing.
Should be easy, actually. No, Josh, it's great to meet you. Alex was telling me a little bit about you, and seems like we kind of just missed like our overlapping of maybe doing some work together. But excited to have you on the podcast today, and we love to start just every episode getting to know our guests a little bit. So let's start there. Tell us a little bit about your backstory. Tell us maybe some things early on that spark or unlocked creativity in your life, or just things that drew you into creating, if there's anything specific, but we'd love to get to know you a bit.
Yeah, of course. Well, thanks again for having me. I'm excited for this and excited to share a little bit about my story and see where we could take the conversation. I'm from Northwest Indiana, so I've lived in Indiana now my whole life as of right now. But I grew up in Northwest Indiana in two towns called Whiting, Robertsdale. They're about as far northwest as you can get. They border Indiana, Illinois, and Lake Michigan kind of borderlines. Grew up there. I played a lot of sports growing up. But also did a lot of skateboarding, did a lot of that type of physical activity out and about, long summer days out with friends at the skate park. And I think honestly, I do think some exposure to creativity came before that, but I do think skateboarding in a lot of ways kind of cemented my interest in creativity. My dad, he at the time was actually playing in bands. He was a drummer. So he played in a local band, and I would go to their band practices. He also was an illustrator in a lot of ways, so he used to sketch a lot. So even before skateboarding, I kind of had this idea that, like, though I'm not musically inclined, that music as an art form, as a form of camaraderie and community building, and then also being around him when he would sketch in his sketchbooks and kind of seeing the different things that he'd come up with. My parents are divorced, so I split time. I live with my mom primarily, but would go and visit my dad. So I'd have that little like high energy kick of creativity. And then I'd come back home and thankfully my mom also was welcoming of it and found ways to enhance it, right? Grew up with a lot of tactile toys, Legos, Lincoln Logs, hobby, like kind of those like model cars that you would glue and paint and put together. So a lot of being exposed to it early on, creativity or the arts in general. And then a lot of just support from my parents. Even though I was busy doing other things like sports and school and hanging out with family and friends, there was still a lot of support at home, which I think is very important. There was an awareness of what art and creativity was, and there was the ability and privilege to have access to it. So kind of grew up, would sketch a lot. I used to draw quite a bit. Would reference a lot of those old skateboarding magazines and watch a lot of skate videos. So kind of early intro to video editing, photography, editorial photography too, thinking about all the different spreads and stuff that were in those print magazines. And I had a lot of interest, and they were around different things that were culturally relevant at that time that I had access to: music, skateboarding, cars, and then also proximity to Chicago. So it would take a lot of trips into Chicago, get into a bigger city, get exposure. And that was kind of like the foundation for a lot of my understanding of what creativity and art was and is.
Yeah, dude, I love that. I love hearing another fellow skateboarder that was brought up in that world, right? Like I made some of my first video work was in the world of skateboarding. Cause I was never like wildly talented at skateboarding, but I could hold a camera and I could put together like a film. And make horrible websites on tripod. You can probably still go to tomorrowskatecrew.tripod.com and find one of our very first like skate team websites.
Roll the clip.
We
Roll
definitely
the clip.
won't link
Play
that.
it. Play that right now,
bro. They're rough. The amount of text intros just to stretch and make something. But I love that like exposure because it was a really creative world and atmosphere when you really got into the sport of it all, right? Behind just like going to the skate park, there was a lot of creativity being poured into that industry to really draw young people into something that had always been popular, but really had this like rise in the late 90s, early 2000s, became this like cultural phenomenon. And so I love hearing that that's where a lot of your creativity was brought up. It was a wild time to be a kid and be a skateboarder, right?
Well, and just the thought of like you'd still come home from school and there would be like music videos on. So you would like when you did have school, you'd come home and you'd be immediately immersed into like music videos. So music, mixed media, art forms, digital art forms. And then you would also be like, okay, cool. Now I got to go out. I'm going to go skate with some friends. And then now you're on your skateboard, which you picked because you liked the illustration of it and you customized it yourself with the different wheels and the bearings and like the whole thing. And then just taking all of that and being aware that it exists. And then I would say in the moment, if you're like, oh, do you find this creative? I'd be like, no, I'm just hanging out with my friends. I'm doing things I enjoy. But when you look back at it, you're like, oh, that was like essential to my understanding of what art and creativity, what it meant to have style, like the whole thing just kind of really kind of ballooned. And looking back on it, and I was very thankful for those interests and opportunities for sure.
Yeah, I would say that even shaped, like for me, that shaped my fashion, right? And like really exposed me to a world of creativity and that, like self-expression that I maybe wasn't really thinking about before. But as you got into that culture and saw where fashion really took off, right? You started to create self-expression around that. And again, I would have looked back and been like, no, I was just like doing what my friends were doing and we were hanging out. But I would agree that that's very like foundational to my creative endeavor. So Josh, talk about like, you've got this creative foundation. I'm assuming you went to college, right? Like tell us a little bit about that journey into like the professional world of creativity.
Yeah, of course. I went to high school on the south side of Chicago. I went to an all male private school. It was a place that I was interested in, competitive in nature, diverse student body. I think there was kids from over 250 zip codes. So it was a very, again, kind of continuing that like exposure, that interest in exposure and in meeting and seeing other people. We didn't have a ton of art classes necessarily, but I did have a wonderful art teacher and we did have an art program. I also got into video editing. We actually had like my school years had some of the first video editing classes, which was really cool. And they were taught by one of my assistant baseball coaches. So I kind of like was interested in it because I liked him and then also kind of got a chance to pick up a camera for the first time and edit. So continued exposure to art as a form of interest, creativity, self-expression, but also as like, oh, these are tangible skill sets that you can then take from here and couple with your education and do things with, right? So I had that really strong foundation. I used to sketch, I used to draw a lot, kind of continued that, and then picked up a camera, a photo and video for the first time in high school and was like, okay, wait, I know I'm good at baseball and basketball, but I'm not that good at baseball, basketball. And I do them as a form of like activity now and a social kind of activity. But ultimately, what else is there in this? And so we did a little bit of just exercising and trying different things throughout high school. And then at that point, I kind of was like, you know what, I think I'm interested in art school. Like, I think that's what I want to do. I think that's something that would be good for me. I did your kind of standard tours throughout the art schools of Chicago, and kind of figured out what they were all about. Um, I think I still held on a little bit to this idea of, well, I maybe could walk on and play baseball or play a sport somewhere. And so in doing so, I narrowed down my focus to Butler University here in Indianapolis, Indiana. And I was like, okay, it's big-ish because of their recent popularity, 2010, 2011 with their March Madness runs, but also still small enough, quaint enough, close to home that maybe I could have some influence, get some opportunity there. Did not end up getting a chance to walk on or do anything, but I think it worked out well. Instead, I went through the art kind of, you had to go through an audition program. So I went in, I put together a portfolio for my work that I created in high school, and some of just my sketches and drawings and things at the time. I was accepted into their art and design program. And I also got a variety of different, very luckily, got a variety of different scholarships, some from my town that I lived in, and then some for art and some for academics at Butler. So it kind of was like a natural fit. I got in, I was able to study art and design, and just it felt like the right choice, right? Being a little bit close to home, but not right in my backyard. So that was cool. That felt like the right move. And then shortly after, I had picked up a minor in strategic communications, but I honestly at the time didn't fully understand what that was or why I was interested in it. And I really just realized after talking with more people that I wanted to be in digital media production, and so I switched my minor to digital media production. So I was going to school for art and design, and then I had a minor in digital media production from there.
That's awesome, man. So much, I think, experience, exposure, right? And I think probably still being influenced by being in a city like Indianapolis, right? Smaller than Chicago, but still pretty creatively affluent place. So lots of opportunities, lots of exposure, and the opportunity to probably interact with some folks, some different brands and things that help shape that. That's super cool to hear. Josh, talk about so let's like jump or we're kind of out of that college space. Talk about your creative process. Because I think one of the things that I'm always fascinated by, Josh and I talk about this a lot, the other Josh, right? You got to make that distinction. Talk about a lot is like how people solve problems through creativity, right? And now you've been kind of co-owner in a business. You've been in the agency world. Talk about just your creative process and how you kind of approach problem solving in the creative space.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the creative process and the creative approach is no small feat. I think everyone's is different, and I think that's what's so beautiful about it. But I think ultimately the most important thing is you find a process that works for you. And I think through my professional experiences, as you had mentioned, is I do best when I have the knowns, or I have as many knowns as possible, right? So that's kind of where I always start. What is known? What is what is so true that it's not going to change? And I kind of map those out to create a roadmap. And then from there, I identify all of the gaps that exist between the knowns, and we figure out what those unknowns are. And then we just start to tackle those unknowns, right? A lot of that is a fun process. I personally like to have some parameters. My brain and my process just doesn't do well when it's a complete unknown or complete wide open blank slate, if you will, or blank canvas. So that's where I start. I map out the knowns. I identify the unknowns, whatever those might be, and they are going to change per project. And then we start to tackle those, start to ask questions, to identify those, to make those more tangible, to make those more real, to figure out which ones matter, which ones don't matter, what do we have to focus on. And then from there, you kind of build this roadmap for the project as a whole. A lot of my experience is working on projects. And so even though there's that creative process and it differs, I generally take the lens of, okay, this is a project, there's a start, there's a finish, and then essentially get to work on that roadmap. There's a lot more to it, just depending on my involvement in the projects, right? That's grossly oversimplifying, but I think that's at the core of one of the things that I learned while doing some freelance work for a local startup was like, identify as much as you can and define things around what you've identified, and then everything else becomes so much easier. You're not just guessing. You're not kind of walking around in a dark room like blindly or whatever it might be. So that is the best way, I think, for me to start the process, and then the rest is just a wild ride. You kind of just go from there, and you have fun, and you try to learn as much as you can throughout that journey.
And I love that. And thanks for sharing that. I think one thing I wanted to pull out of that was when you said, you talked about how, should be different for it's likely different for everybody, the process, but for you found that you need like some guide rails and kind of like these like I almost want to say like thinking in a box, which is like almost when you're in this world, it's like, no, you always think outside of a box. And there, it's kind of that both and at times, right? Like, I think that because I'm the same way, like I love, and it creates a lot of collaboration at the beginning of the process, right? Like I need to know about your organization, your goal, your mission here. Like, tell me all these things that we need to hit. And then it gives you that freedom where so often, I think, especially early on in my journey, it was like, well, I guess I'm just the creative mind that's supposed to know it all. Like you just tell me to do something and all of a sudden like something just unlocks inside of me. And I'm like, here it is, right. And there's so much like pressure. There's so much, just all these emotions that run through you when you're like, I honestly don't know what I'm doing. I'm like throwing darts at a target that I don't in the dark. Like, and it creates all these like hard opportunities. And the more I think the more that you can do ahead of time working with that client or working with that person, really creates something beautiful in the end. And I think that's why it's so important for us to kind of talk through the creative process a little bit, because I can even admit, like, early on, I didn't know how to even go about that in some ways. Like, I knew it on my end, but I didn't really know how to like bring in my client more into that. And when you're able to do that in a way that you both are just really working together, right? Like, it creates something way better than you could create on your own or the client could create on their own. And I think it's so important to be able to ask the right questions and have the right things in place for you guys to really create something beautiful and timeless. And I was just going to say real quick, I think that's something I actually learned from Josh working with you at the nonprofit that I was at the time. We brought you guys in to do some video production for us. And I think I left one of our meetings downtown with our team. And I remember walking out of the building and looking and saying, like, we've got to start asking questions like they just asked us about this video. And we were working on a video. We were going to be filming in a hospital, medical healthcare context, right? Like all kinds of details, but also like the essence of what you guys were getting at was really trying to help craft the narrative. And ultimately, like, you delivered something far better than we could have internally. But I think you guys approached it with this really like thought-provoking process that asked a lot of really deep questions. And so like, I will never forget that day walking out of that building downtown and having that conversation and just telling our team, like, man, we got a lot to learn from the questions that they asked and how they asked them and approached them. And I think it ultimately, in my time at that organization, that was one of the best pieces that was ever produced creatively in that campaign and kind of for that corporate brand. And it was because of the questions you guys asked in the end product you ultimately ended up delivering for us.
Yeah, and I think there's so much to be said too, just about how much. I mean, you can't take out the human factor of the work that we do, right? Like, there is humanity and soul at the core of creativity. There's no doubt about it. And if there's not, there's a problem, right? And I think in asking questions and taking the time to sit back and like get to know one another or get to know the brand, the product, the audience, whatever it is, that's the only way that you're going to attach some humanity to the work, and you start to grow your relationship with the people that you're working on. So, Josh, to your point about collaboration, right? Like, that is how you form a really strong relationship for collaboration, and ultimately you build trust. And if you can build trust with the people you're working with, like, the sky's the limit, right? So, totally big proponent for questions. I also love the question, which is like, what is this not? Like, tell me what you don't want this to be. Because if we walk away and we're like, oh, we think it's this, and you're like, oh, I didn't want it to be that. You're like, well, I should have asked that question. So that's one of the things that we've added to that roster of questions, which is like, what is this not? And what don't you want this to turn into? Because if we could minimize all of those random factors and like take away some things, that helps us sharpen our focus on what we're actually making and what we're trying to achieve.
Yeah. And it just helps us be, work more efficiently too, right? Like we're not just trying to guess at things, and we're all, focused on where we're at and what the target is. And so let's go after it and use our time to really do that. So, man, I've learned so much over the years of just how important it is to ask really good questions on the front end of that process with your clients, because it helps, it helps in the long term, in the back end of things, with that feedback and that, some of those tensions that may come when you're turning in concepts or different things, because you guys are kind of focused a little more together on the same idea.
And I would say practically too, Josh, you talked about efficiency. As a business owner, there's always this tension of delivering work, billing clients, getting paid, right? Like providing an income. And having learned how to implement a question like that of like, what should this not be, has, I think, saved me hours of work that, one, I'm not passing on that bill to a client, but also I'm getting to a really solid end product faster, and I'm able to keep income flowing into our business because we are more efficient, because we're asking questions on the front end. I think everyone tells you like the better you plan on the front end, the better the project's going to go. And I think as creatives, we're like, no, we're just going to find the spark along the way, and it's going to be a shooting star that carries us through the project, right? And it's like, cool, that's that star that may flame out in like 5 days, and you're, still miles away from having the project done. But if you had taken the time, if you had asked the one question, what is this not supposed to be, at the very beginning, you probably could have arrived. And so I think there's real practical benefit if you are a business owner, if you are someone who's freelancing, to asking more questions on the front end. It doesn't make you look, I think, incompetent to your clients. I think as a young creative, I felt that a little bit of the tension we talked about of like, oh, well, they probably don't think I know what I'm doing if I'm asking them all these questions. I need to just like put on the face like, yeah, I got this. I think it actually makes us look more professional, more equipped, and more human to the partners and clients that we get to work with.
Yeah, I think that's a great point too, especially for young creatives, people who are trying to start out in whatever industry they're in. And it also could be for anyone. This is for any industry. This is for any profession, any occupation. But I think the more questions you ask, the more engaged you seem, and the more interested you are in the topic. And you get a chance to, I'm not saying show your ego by any means, but you do get a chance to show off your interest and your understanding of the thing that you're talking about. I think that's critical for young professionals, young artists. But also, we work so often with external partners, and we do a lot of bidding and we do a lot of outreach, and then we eventually work towards awarding a job. And it's obvious, honestly, when some production partners don't ask questions. I'm like, you're either not interested, you're too busy, or you think you know it all. And I'm not sure that that's the right collaborative or cultural fit for this job or for the team that I'm on, right? And so it's just as important when you start out in your career, and it's just as important to carry that same practice through and make that a part of your roadmap, put that into your process, and just know that asking questions is it shouldn't be a tall task. It shouldn't give you anxiety. It really should empower you and inform you, and again, at the core of it, build trust for everyone who's working on the project.
Yeah, that's so good. I love the time we spent there kind of walking through that creative process, because I really love what the things that you were saying there and the focus that you put on that. I think it's really important. Sometimes it can just be overlooked or just not done well, but you're right. Like, we got to constantly tweak those things too, and kind of rework them as we evolve and grow and as well. So thank you for that. That was some really good stuff. I think moving on to a similar direction maybe, but what's some advice that you would give creatives? And I know we just touched on some things there with around asking questions and stuff, and I don't know if, hope we didn't steal your answer there, but at the same time, like, I think there's a lot of, opportunity for people that have been in this field for a while to just give some advice to even people that are coming up or that have been in it for a while as well. So I'd love to hear that.
I think there's a couple things to note when it goes to about giving advice to young creatives or young professionals generally. This is my favorite one by far, which is everything's made up. Legit. That's no joke. Everything started from nothing and is entirely made up. So I think that's one of the things that's so daunting early on. If you're either like in high school, decided that you don't want to go to college and you're trying to find whether it's a skill, you're trying to go to trade school, or you're just trying to get a job. Like, there's a lot of assumptions that the people that you're applying with or working with. And sorry, let me go back real fast. It depends on, it doesn't matter if you're, going through high school. It doesn't matter if you're in college. It doesn't matter even if you're going to graduate school and beyond and have continued education. Everyone had started from knowing nothing about that topic or that subject. You're no different and they're no different. I think a lot of people get caught early on of like, well, I don't know a lot and I have to learn a lot fast. So it becomes intimidating, like whether you're applying to jobs or you're networking and meeting people and trying to do some get connected in some way. The assumption is like, well, these people know so much more and I can't possibly have anything to add. And I think that couldn't be more false, right? I think there's something extremely important about every individual, that they come from a unique background. They have their own set of experiences. And through these experiences, through these influences, through these observations, like they have their own perspective and they have an opinion about something and they have something to bring to the table. And so I think it's just important for people to know, like, it's all made up. What you're about to bring to the table is just as important as someone else. And it doesn't matter if they are starting at the same time as you or if they've been there for a decade or more. There's something that you can teach other people and there's something that you can learn from them as well. You hate to hear when someone is like, oh, I really wanted to do this thing, but I knew I didn't know it, or I knew I couldn't catch up. And you're like, no, it's actually better that you don't know anything and you have no preconceived notions or biases towards the thing that you're interested in. That's often how things change positively. That's often how more people get brought into the collaborative process. That's often how you come up or present an idea, you have a perspective, you have an opinion, and you bring it to the table with confidence, and someone goes, wow, why haven't we thought of that? Why weren't we doing that all along? Yeah. So I think there's power in knowing that everything is made up and kind of coming to term with that and dealing with that uncertainty moving forward, and then using it as a tool for influence and for understanding and for positive change when you kind of start moving in that right direction.
Wow, that's awesome.
Man, I love
that. Hearing that, it's just like the freedom that you can feel and experience as just a human, right? Like set aside creativity, set aside, your job, whatever, like just everything is made up. Like even stepping out into that and going about your day as a husband or a father or an employee, like all these things. And it's like, there's something so freeing in grasping that and allowing it to kind of like impact in your soul in a way that is like, everything is made up. Like they may know a little more than me in this area, but I still have something to bring, right? Like it's, and there's just such freedom in that. And I don't have to feel this like imposter syndrome or this, like this stress and anxiety around not knowing things and not having the experience that somebody else might have. But I love that. I've never heard it put that way. And I think that's just a really great way to put it.
Yeah, I think that definitely needs to be put on a t-shirt and be a reminder every day. Everything is made up. Man, that's such like a powerful line. Because you're right. It also, I think, helps us open the door to asking better questions. Back to what we were talking about. If you have this understanding that everything kind of started as nothing, then when you approach a situation, you work with a client, you're working on a project and they're presenting, hey, this is the thing, this is the brand. You can ask the question like, well, why is it that way? Help me understand and kind of go down that rabbit trail right? Using like the old school 5 whys method of like, well, why? And really gets you when you start at that base of like, everything is made up. So why is it the way that it is? I think it really opens the door and the potential for us to ask better questions rather than just assuming there's a really good reason for everything. Like, I think it gives us permission to ask questions about everything. Because then we can uncover the true meaning, the true depth, the true character of the things that we're working on and creating. And our work and our relationships and the trust all becomes way more enriched and way deeper than it would have if we just assumed that that person knows way more. And so I'm just going to roll with it. Right. And I also think there is, like, I would say this to my young creative self, that question or that statement doesn't give me the power to just not trust anyone who has gone ahead of me and who is above me. Right. I think I would have heard that as a 19-year-old who didn't go to college and started in the world of creativity and been like, well, if everything's made up, then they don't know what the heck they're doing. And so why am I going to listen to them? Right. Yeah. And there is a space for like mutual respect for people who have been in a craft for a while. But it's then understanding, okay, they started from not knowing. So ask them questions about how they got to where they are and why they make the decisions that they make. And it opens the door for that. It's not this free pass to be like, well, everything's made up and you don't know what the heck you're doing, so you're doing it wrong. Right. Like, that's how I would have taken it as a young person. And I think that's a good caveat to give.
Yeah, it's a great distinction. And I think the next phase of that, walking in with the thought of everything's made up, at least it gives you some agency back. It gives you the comfort and the knowing that you can ask questions. And I think the next step of that, the kind of evolution of that, that advice is you need to have an opinion. You need to be present. You need to listen. You need to be involved. You need to be aware. You need to show up on time and be punctual. And you need to form an opinion for yourself, because the kind of elevated version of that is you never know when an opportunity is going to come up. And so if you're the only one working on the thing and you've been around for it all, and someone's like, I just don't know what we should do, you need to be ready to be like, here's my recommendation actually, and here's this perspective that I have, and here's the opinion that I feel strongly about based on all the things we talked about. And I think that's when you kind of change from that where you're in the learning phase and you're learning about whatever job you're in, and now you become a contributor. Now you like are actively participating, and people go, oh, we know we can take you serious. We know we can take your opinion seriously because you've been paying attention and you've made a really strong recommendation. Or we didn't like their recommendation, however, it did inform this other thing, and now we know how to proceed. And so, that first bit is, hey, it's made up. Like, relieve yourself of all that stress and anxiety. Know that you belong and that you're welcomed, and that there is a place for you. But then don't, or make sure to take advantage of that opportunity and have an opinion and be an active participant in whatever it is that you're working on. I think those things are important.
Yes.
Yeah, that's great. It's so much of that, it like even goes back to like the trust building, right? And all of that is like foundational in building trust and continuing to have trust with the people you work alongside, people you work for, people you work with, all of that. Trust goes a long way. And I think that as creatives, like, we just have such an incredible opportunity to build trust, to allow others to trust us as well, and just by asking questions and showing up at times can be huge. Josh, this has been awesome, man. I've been like just hanging on like every word. I've seriously I've loved every moment of this, and I haven't said that every podcast, so I'm not just saying
it's true. I think it's this Josh vibe. Like, I'm starting to realize that maybe there is something to this, and I need to give it more credit.
Dude, I was not playing.
I agree.
You have made Josh better, and I appreciate that.
Yeah. I will be like Josh 2.0 now after this.
I love it. I mean, that's what it's about, right?
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. No, we've talked to a bunch of people, and it's about like just so much of like being that sponge, right? And like just taking in so much, learning, growing, being able to expand and learn different perspectives, learn from people. I think that's what's been so great about this. With that, curious to know, where do you see creativity going in the next 5 years? So whether this is specifically like with some of the things that you specifically are working on, or just in general, where you see things headed.
I think it's something that's already happening, what I'm about to say, but I think it's so important that I do think it will become more maybe accessible and more the norm, which is essentially the idea of this like holistic integration, this idea that everything is connected, everything is a system or an ecosystem. You can't do something over here and it doesn't impact something over here. And beyond that, so you have this holistic, fully integrated, whether it's an idea, a campaign, a project, whatever it is. And then you introduce the idea of like transdisciplinary. So it doesn't really matter who's working on the project, and it doesn't necessarily need to be the same type of disciplines or roles, but it's likely going to be a lot of different people from different roles, different disciplines, and different perspectives. And I think that's how we're going to start to tackle some larger creative challenges, or generally just problem solve more effectively and more efficiently. And that sounds really broad, but it's just the thought of like, okay, if you go into a room with a client or a project and someone is like, I really want to do blank, you might have an initial reaction where it's like, okay, we're just going to build our team and we actually already have some people in house. We're just going to use the same 4 disciplines that we usually use. But I think there's a benefit to being a specialist in some ways and bringing in those people, and in fact turning some of those things back on the client or the person that brought the problem, and saying, actually, you are a specialist. You are someone that knows more than we know about this thing. You're actually just as equitable of a stakeholder in this as we are. And in fact, I want to go outside of our organization and get someone that I know can do this really, really well as well, because they just bring a different perspective and they're trained differently. So just the idea that, the same formula, the same elements aren't always going to solve the problem. And in fact, if we keep doing things that way, we're probably just going to solve all the problems the same, which will create new problems. So that's kind of where my head is: integration, holistic, human-centered and humanity-centered, even more so, and just transdisciplinary. There's going to be a lot of different disciplines that you've never worked with before, and you should embrace them with open arms, welcome them into the room and say, what do you think about this and how can we better work together?
Man. And I love that approach, because it takes, maybe those traditional mindsets of like, we're going to be the agency or the studio or whatever that can serve every need that our client has from a creative perspective, and says, hey, we're going to really focus in on the thing that we know we're good at, we're trained in, and we're going to bring in the highest caliber of talent to help our clients serve these problems in a more fully integrated way. And it removes that kind of like stigma of, hey, we're the one-stop shop for everything. And I think that in turn, I mean, we've seen that, right? As a brand design studio, we really want to focus on the brand development work with our clients. We're not your video production studio. We're not your social media management agency. Like we're not your media buying agency. We're not those things. And I was nervous about that when we started. But our clients have had so much respect for us saying, hey, that's not us. Like, you don't want me running your Facebook advertising campaign. And I'm going to bring in someone who we'll partner with them. We will provide the creative assets. We'll give them everything they need that supports your brand well. But we are not the right people to do that. We should bring someone in who is wildly more talented at that. And all of our clients have respected that deeply. No one has said like, no, I hired you guys to be the one-stop shop. And I think that's a little bit of like a creative myth that is starting to break apart. We're starting to see that more and more. And so I love that. That's where you see creativity happening. And I agree, it's starting to happen in pockets all across the world of creativity. And I think it's up to us who live in those creative disciplines to come together and help bring that kind of creative problem solving to the world. Because like you said, I think that's going to help us be better at solving problems and not solving the problems the same way and creating more problems in the long run.
Yeah. I think there's also something to be said there about if you're working with someone and you bring up something and they're like, oh no, we could do that for you. And you're like, it makes me like, can you though? Are you sure? Can you like tell me more about it? And they're like, well, we'll figure it out. We'll get back to you, but we got it. And I'm like, I don't know if I trust that. Like, I don't, and that's not what I expect from my partners, right? That's not something I expect from the people that I want to work with, that I think highly of too. So I think it says a lot about the people behind that saying, hey, we're actually going to bring in other people for this, and this is the right move, and here's why. Like, kind of knowing your limitations, but also in a way, you're also sharing more about yourself by doing so. You're saying, actually, yeah, we thought a lot about that. That's not for us. However, we really appreciate this person's work or this group's work, and they've made a huge impact for these other businesses. Let's actually work with them. And I think there's so much about it that historically is the idea of gatekeeping and like keeping that information to yourself and not sharing it, thinking that it's a competitive advantage. And I think it actually does the opposite. And so I'm more so about like, open the gate, open the doors, get the information out there, and just show the people on the other side of the table or the screen that you really care about them, and you care so much about them that you may not be the person that also solved that problem with them, and instead let's bring in some other people.
Right. Yeah. It's about us wanting what's ultimately best for our partners and the problem, and not what's best for our businesses, which can feel counterintuitive. But I think it's what will create better creative work in the long run that stands the test of time, rather than just jumps on a fad or is a quick solution to a long-term problem.
Yeah, I agree.
Man, so good. Josh, this has been incredible. Thank you so much for hanging out with us today. We would love to know, like, what's on the horizon for you personally, professionally, anything that you're working on that you're super pumped about?
I'm actually starting a certificate here in a couple days. Actually, the course opens next week. It's a Foundation of Design Thinking certificate through IDEO U. They have an IDEO U program where they do a lot of certificates and courses. And so there's a couple different things that I'm going to work on. And this certificate it's made up of 2 courses. There's Insights for Innovation and From Ideas to Action. So it's a lot about, I think this first segment is a lot about like actually interviewing people, like picking a problem, interviewing them, learning about the problem, and trying to figure out more about insights and how to use those insights. And then the second part is actually to take those ideas that you've worked on and the information that you've gathered, and now what are the solutions for it? Like, how might you actually solve those problems? And so that should last through May. Actually, it'll start at the end of February, go through May, and then I'm hoping to kind of piggyback straight into their advanced design thinking certificate as well. Just, I think there's something, especially when you get into your professional career and you are kind of a specialist, you are expected to kind of continue to grow and learn in that. And I think that's great. And I think that is appropriate. But I think there's something to be said about challenging the way that you think and the way that you approach problems, be that personal or professional. And I'm hoping that through these continued education certificates that I'll be able to expand on the way that I think and approach problems. So excited for it.
Dude, that's awesome. And like we said, love hearing that you're going down that road of continuing education, right? There's still so much for all of us to learn. We won't master it. And so I love hearing that you're going to be diving into that. The world needs more people who are continuing to learn and helping to solve better problems. So super pumped for that. Well, Josh, thank you so much. Again, an amazing conversation. I think people are going to go back and listen to this one a couple times, hopefully, because there's just so much wisdom, so many good little nuggets that you've shared. So thanks for being here. And we want to thank all of you for joining us, listening to another episode of Creative Belief. We hope this podcast has been a reminder that you were made to create incredible things that make the world a better place. So go create something today that does just that. If you want to subscribe to the show, we'd love to have you follow along. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube. You can also follow along with what's going on at our brand design studio on Instagram. That's at Creator Studio. And that's at CRTR Studio. We'll be sure to link to how you can connect with Josh if you want to ask him further questions or get connected with him in the show notes. So make sure you check that out. Josh, thanks for this. This has been awesome.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, man.